All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Philly Jug and welcome to our September meeting. So, this month we have a fun cup of Joe with Open Liberty. I'll explain a bit more about that in just a moment here, and I'll also do a brief introduction of Andy. I did want to do sort of a general introduction and what's going on with the Jug. So, we are trying to reevaluate our virtualness. We'll see how it goes, but we're trying, I think, at this point to try to see if we can get the October jug in person. And certainly, it would be good to get some feedback from folks over here about what they think virtual versus not virtual and how soon they're ready to go in. I guess we'll see what we see. If we wind up pulling off October or November and see how our attendance looks like, I think that'll tell us a lot about where we need to go with the jug. But in the meanwhile, if you guys have some questions or some suggestions or what your preference would be, honestly, it would be really good to hear from folks. Also, obviously, we cannot continue virtually forever. That's not in the spirit of our jug. The real question is like how long do we do it, and what is a sensible point for us to stop doing virtual. So without further ado, you will hear from us. I'm hoping fairly soon for the October, December, and November meetings. And in the meanwhile, I think let's make the best of things the way they are. So a little bit about today's session. So this is a session actually I've been wanting to have for quite a while because I really think that this is a relevant and important topic for a lot of developers, even if they don't really realize it. Now, Liberty and WebSphere Liberty, it's got some interesting history behind it, right? So this is Liberty and Open WebSphere Liberty. At this point, is not new, right? So it's been around for quite a while. It's not, unfortunately, not very well known, and that's, I think, very, very unfortunate. I would say it is basically IBM's take on a next generation platform as opposed to IBM's old Java platform, which I think we all know and we all have some opinions about, which is WebSphere Traditional. This is a successor to that. So it still follows the Jakarta E, Java E microprofile family of standards, but it is a very different take on what an app server is. And hopefully Andy will be talking to us a little bit about that. And you really should at least check out the Open Liberty website, in my opinion. I think you will be very pleasantly surprised. I have worked with a couple of customers that are using Western Liberty and Open Liberty today, and honestly, they have nothing but good things to say, which is really a shocker to I think to some people that have worked with certainly Webster Traditional in the past. So I think this is a very relevant session. We'll obviously record it. If you find it interesting, please do share it with your colleagues as well. So today we have somebody that's very qualified to talk about the topic. Andy is a part of the Open Liberty team. In fact, he works on the Kubernetes part, Kubernetes support of the Open Liberty team in particular. So without further ado, I'm gonna hand it over to Andy, and he's gonna do a little bit of an introduction and hopefully maybe give us a little bit more of a teaser as to what he plans to do with us in about the next hour or so. So please take it away, Andy, and I'm gonna actually go sort of off screen and let you have it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, and I'm really happy to be here to speak to everyone. I am located in Poughkeepsie, New York, here at the IBM location, and I've been an IBMer now for just about 24 years, and my entire time here at IBM has been spent in the application server space, the predecessors of traditional WebSphere application server, as was mentioned, all the way up through Open Liberty and Open Liberty WebSphere or regular WebSphere Liberty. And my most recent team and work effort is, as was mentioned, sort of in the Kubernetes side of Liberty. I'm working on a team where we're focused on the developer experience using Liberty in the cloud, in a Kubernetes cloud, providing an application stack that developers can make use of to really understand how it is to develop their applications in a live cloud. So We'll get to all of that as we proceed, but this did give me an opportunity to wear my one piece of Philadelphia gear. My daughter is a recent May 2021 graduate of Drexel University, so I do spend a lot of time in Philadelphia. So I feel like I could be a member of the Philadelphia Jug just by the amount of time that I spend in Philadelphia. So I'm glad to be here and talk to you about Open Liberty. So let's jump in here. I thought I would start things off today, if I can get to the next slide, with just a little bit of fun stuff to begin with. So the Open Liberty team has long put together what we like to refer to as our Liberty Bikes application. And while it looks like a fun bit of Tron-like trivia, playable game where you're, essentially one of those Tron motorcycle drivers on a grid field. This is a bona fide game that is running, written in Java for the Liberty server platform. But the interesting thing about it is underneath the covers is that this is an open source project that the Open Liberty team uses to highlight the strengths of Liberty. So it is an open source project that anyone can take a look at. There's an associated GitHub repo that contains it, which I can make available. But if you want to try it out and play it afterwards, here's the link to it. But this game on the surface is using a set of open APIs. APIs such as WebSockets and a broad range of the micro profile APIs that Liberty supports, and it runs in a hosted IBM cloud environment 24/7. It's deployed there using our tool sets to deploy applications into a Kubernetes cloud. So I thought I'd start off just with this bit of fun, interesting trivia. If you want to check that out later, but you'll get the full Liberty experience while reliving your Tron memories of the movie. So continuing on, I would like to invite you to check out our openliberty.io splash page. You're going to find a lot of interesting insights into the Open Liberty project. Open Liberty itself is an open source project. We have been open sourced as Open Liberty for at least 4 years now, maybe a bit longer. So it is out there and available to be looked at. Feel free to take a look at the project itself. You're going to find a lot of resources there for, getting started with Open Liberty. There's source code that's available at our splash page. You can find ways there to, look at some guides on how to experience all of the various offerings that Liberty has. There's documents there that can be read, as well as opportunities to file issues with the development team, interact with the development team. Again, it's an open source development team. So if that's something of interest to you, please feel free to check it out at that location. But so let's talk about some reasons why we are so excited to discuss Open Liberty. So as we transition from our traditional WebSphere application server, about 9 years ago, we started the Liberty project. And the goal at the outset 9+ years ago was really to create a lightweight runtime application server that at its heart strives to provide what we're calling just enough runtime to support developers' applications. So what this means in a nutshell is that those older, more traditional application server runtimes really, while, let's talk about traditional WebSphere, it had a highly performant nature to it, but it also had everything under the sun inside of it to support every type of application that might be deployed to it. So whether or not those applications required all of those aspects that were baked into WebSphere application server or not, they were there. And what that meant was TWAS really like had a big memory footprint. So the goal of Liberty is to be this, very lightweight, highly performant, feature-specific application server runtime, because it was understood that really most applications only need a subset of the APIs and functionality that those older, more traditional runtimes provided. So, just enough runtime is really about allowing developers to configure the application server to maintain or provide only those features or subsets of APIs that they know their applications require. So it's a very composable runtime that is configured by developers to support the applications that they know what is required for them. And having that smaller footprint, the ability to create those smaller footprint application server instances, we've done a lot of research into it, and it really provides a chance to realize significant disk and memory savings for these application server instances running Open Liberty. And that leads to realizing a lot of lower operating costs. So the smaller the footprint in terms of disk and memory that these application server instances can maintain, results in the ability to really place more Liberty instances next to each other, supporting applications with these smaller needs, and we can really see this realization in the density of application server instances that can be realized using Open Liberty. Another thought that went into Liberty and Open Liberty is the idea of continuous delivery. So really allowing developers to know that they are receiving images from the Open Liberty project that are continuously being updated with security fixes and other bug fixes on a regular cadence, can allow these applications to be developed knowing that there isn't a need to hesitate and wait to obtain new functionality, and thus incur a huge migration effort. So the regular cadence of Open Liberty's continuous delivery really provides a reduction of that technical debt when it comes to developing applications for it. And that goes sort of hand in hand with a lot of the work that we did around zero migration. So the basic idea around zero migration is that, any configuration that you do as a developer for your application going forward is always going to work. So we will never change any of the features or the configuration behaviors of Open Liberty as we move forward in time, adopting new APIs and new approaches to configuring the application. So you basically write your configuration once, and we're going to see how simple and easy it is to write migration, or to write configuration for the Liberty application server, but it's always going to work going forward. We're never going to take that away. Open Liberty probably predates the Kubernetes approach by a couple of years, but the reality is that our Open Liberty development team was really focused on a lot of the same items and ideas that the Kubernetes project was hoping to achieve as well. So it became very easy for us to conform and optimize to a Kubernetes world as Kubernetes became the de facto standard. So, we've done a lot of work to optimize Open Liberty for Kubernetes environments to be ready for deployment into Kubernetes environments, and also, to work on some self-tuning and optimal performance aspects of our application runtime that really benefit the Kubernetes experience. And then finally, Liberty has taken to heart the entire breadth of the developer experience, and this is something that I'm currently involved in. So really helping developers develop their applications with a set of tools and get that sort of inner loop instant feedback from their application development efforts in a server environment, in a container environment, and even in a live Kubernetes cluster or cloud environment. We're going to see that rapid inner loop sort of demoed as we go on here. So that's kind of the 6 high-level reasons why we are so excited about having people take a look at Open Liberty. So as was alluded to earlier, there are people that are taking notice of what Open Liberty has to offer, and here's just a small sampling of what people are saying. So a lot of the things that I just touched on, what we're excited about, so that sort of light operation and efficient operation that we spend so much time working on with our just enough runtime. The footprint is very small and nimble, and people really appreciate it for the ease of management and its ability to be easily configured and just provide just enough of what you need and really no more. The simplicity of its use. So you can see that we've got some people out there talking about us, and I'm here today to talk to you all and hopefully help you take a look at this. So just to go back and touch on this idea of just enough runtime, as I was mentioning, as a developer, we want to provide the ability for developers to control just exactly what features they want loaded into each runtime instance. So in the past, as I was saying, we had our large traditional footprint, which was highly performant and had so many great capabilities associated with it, and still does. But we took that large approach, and we really went back to the drawing board. And in Open Liberty, we essentially re-architected a small runtime kernel that could manage the maintenance of the application server. And then we took a look at all of those items that went into our original traditional WebSphere application server that were there to support applications, all the APIs that we support. And we broke those out and broke those down into what we refer to as features. And so it is the features that a developer will configure into each instance of their runtime. And so if a developer is developing an application that is really only involved in some JAX-RS processing, then that's really the only feature that application server requires to have present to support those applications. And our kernel, the Open Liberty kernel, understands how to load just a specific feature, and more importantly, it understands the feature dependency trees that are involved with each feature. So while a developer might specify a JAX-RS-2.1 feature as the feature they want present, that JAX-RS feature may have subsequent sub features that it depends on, and the Open Liberty kernel knows how to load a set of underlying features that will support that top level desired feature. And so you have a much smaller footprint at the end of the day when you as a developer know exactly what you want. We give you the tools to create a server instance that will support exactly what you want. So that's the idea behind just enough runtime. So I mentioned the simple configuration, or the configuration of the server, several times already, and here we see just an example of our server configuration. So and this is really what is involved. It's a a text-based XML formatted file. Server.xml is our main configuration file for the application server. And in that server config, you can see that our server is defined, and we are specifying what feature we want to have present. And it could be a list of features. There may be other features that a developer needs to have in place for other applications they're working on. But all those features would be specified in that feature manager stanza. And that's the application server's stanza for understanding what needs to be loaded, and then again, what feature dependencies below that may need to be loaded to provide that very small footprint application server that's highly designed just for the application you're working on. And then, the additional configuration that can occur here is really configuration by exception. So you're configuring what you need and what you want to have in place that might be custom for your application. So that's what I mean by configuration by exception. Otherwise, there are defaults in place for all of the configuration aspects of the server. And when applications evolve and new configurations are desired, those configurations can be added to this server XML file, and you configure just what you need. There's files for specifying JVM options and a server.env file for setting up your server environment, but everything is very straightforward and simple to do. All right, so as a developer, obviously developers are wanting to take advantage of the latest APIs, but I think this is a good opportunity to show that IBM and the Open Liberty project has a long history in supporting the latest APIs as they began to roll out into the developer community. So we started our API support, back in traditional WebSphere 8.5 and 2012 when we provided support for the Servlet, JSP, and JPA APIs in our application server, and it's just continued to evolve from that point on. So we do support a wide spectrum of APIs in Open Liberty, all the way from the traditional APIs that are required to run some of our older monolithic applications, but really focused on the latest Jakarta EE APIs, Jakarta EE 8 in 2019, and this year we have introduced our Jakarta EE 9 APIs. We're the first vendor product to be certified on the Jakarta page. So on top of that, we do provide the full suite of micro profile features and APIs, and we were one of the first to deliver those into the application server. But it's also important to point out that IBM leads many of these API working groups, or is very involved in many of them. And at the end of the day, it's just about providing that wide range of options for developers to take advantage of, and it's all in one place in this server runtime. So let's see here. I just wanted to give you kind of a high-level oversight of what's available from a Jakarta EE perspective. Jakarta being the new direction for the enterprise application development support. So as that project continues to evolve, you're probably very familiar with a lot of these APIs and features. So that is fully available in IBM Open Liberty. And again, as I mentioned, we have provided that Jakarta EE9 compatibility in our most recent betas. And you can see that out there on the Jakarta EE landing page. You'll find Open Liberty listed there as providing that support. So, we continue to work on this in a very serious manner to provide that for developers to take advantage of. Back to micro profile. So I like to look at this support as a series of levels that sort of lead you to understand how microservice-based applications are developed. So Open Liberty supports all of these open cloud native Java APIs as part of our runtime instances. But if you look at the the bottom layer, sort of that what I'm calling the core layer, you can think of those as the APIs that sort of form the building blocks of developing individual microservices. So everything you need for developing individual microservices is supported in our runtime. As we move forward with our microservices into that integrate phase where we want to start coalescing all these various microservices that we've developed into more composed, larger functional applications, you make use of the APIs in that sort of integrate layer. All of those are present and supported. And then finally, that observe layer, that top layer, as those larger composed functional applications begin to be rolled out into Kubernetes environments, MicroProfile provides those APIs to integrate seamlessly and nicely into Kubernetes environments, cloud environments. So all of this is supported by the Liberty runtime and our application server. It should be noted that we also support running Spring Boot applications on Open Liberty. So Spring Boot applications will run in the Open Liberty environment. There is a feature that can be configured to bring in the support, just enough of the runtime support to support running Spring Boot applications. But the idea here is by running your Spring Boot application on Open Liberty, you are running that Spring Boot application in a very nimble and highly performant server environment that you get with Open Liberty. And that, again, that really does come from that just enough server notion that is at the heart of Open Liberty. But at the same time, while developers might be highly focused on Spring Boot applications, at the same time, in the same place, in the same server runtime, you are also able, if you so wish, to take advantage of all of those other APIs that I just mentioned prior to this. So without having to switch gears, switch server runtimes, or move in a different direction, should a developer wish to then branch off into a microservices-based application, it's all present in Open Liberty. And it's really as simple as adding some configuration features to the server XML to start taking advantage of those features to support those applications without incurring the huge overhead of a full-blown server runtime. All right, so just to see kind of where we feel Liberty fits into the grand scheme of things, we really do feel that Open Liberty occupies that sweet spot, so to speak, between that sort of monolithic traditional application server environment and the more highly granular microservices based environment. So Liberty can really manage applications on both ends of that spectrum and do so in that highly performant and nimble manner. So we do maintain APIs that you would find traditionally used by maybe those older, more monolithic applications, and it becomes really an effort to migrate or at least update your configuration through the server XML or put a server XML configuration environment together to support those monolithic applications. But that really gives you the time then to start running your older applications almost immediately within Open Liberty. It gives you the time then to start considering, well, maybe there's a way to break this down into a more microservice type of approach, and you have that that full runtime available to do that. So that's really where we do see Liberty fitting, but ideally in any of those scenarios, you're going to be seeing the most nimble and performant server runtime to support those applications. All right, so a little finer detail on Liberty zero migration and what we mean by that. So, as I mentioned, in terms of Liberty zero migration, essentially any configuration behavior that you have developed for as a developer for your application, none of that configuration behavior is ever going to change going forward. So any current or past configuration settings that your application is making use of, that a developer has established for their application as part of configuring Open Liberty as a server, they will always work in the future. That configuration behavior will never go away, and you will never have to update it. So the way that is supported, as new function starts to roll into the Liberty application server, as you know, as we move forward with APIs of various microprofile, for instance, APIs start to evolve. The newer function is released in updated feature version number packages. So if you had a feature, say ABC-1.0 that you were making use of, and you had your server configured for, any new behavior to that ABC API would be released as, say, ABC-2.0. And only if you decided as a developer that you wanted to make use of those new features would you change your configuration. In other words, we're never going to go back to a previous version of a specific API or feature and update that behavior or function within that feature. It's a point in time. It's a point in time release that you can always depend on as a developer when you're configuring your server. If you as a developer wish to stay at that feature level, because that is all of the runtime that you need, and that's all of the behavior you need, you can stay there forevermore as we go into the future. But as your application evolves and you're taking advantage of further features, the migration becomes one of a configuration migration. You're just changing the feature number in your list of features that you wish that you want your server to maintain, and you'll never see those older versions go away. So we don't take function out of previous feature version levels. So at the end of the day, the developer decides on what is functionally available in their server runtime, including their Java. So you can choose any set of Java support that you wish, that you can see listed here. So even that is in your hands, what level of Java you want to be running with. So let's talk now, after kind of going through these ideas of Open Liberty, let's talk about what it's like to develop with Liberty, and talk a little bit about what went into our thoughts on the developer experience. So we know through a lot of interaction with developers that developers need to have that rich set of APIs, and more specifically in current day, that developers need those microservices APIs to solve their use cases. When it comes to microservice approaches, developers want to work with a range of editors of their choosing. So that was something that we definitely took notice of. I think that that fast inner loop experience where we're making code changes to our application and seeing the results of those code changes in a running environment immediately, giving us that feedback as developers, that's really, really important. It increases productivity of developers to make changes and see those changes reflected in a running application almost immediately. Really helps speed up that development experience, knowing that your application changes and updates are happening live within a running configured server really gives you good feedback. Developers like to work with the build technology of choice. So, in today's world, that's Maven and Gradle, and Open Liberty's build support has been integrated with those two build choices. And really the development and integration with containers, Kubernetes, DevOps has been a big part of the focus for the Open Liberty team. So let's talk about that inner loop experience a little bit further. So that fast iteration, basically Open Liberty team has provided an open source plugin project that we have developed for both the Maven and Gradle build toolset. And that Open Liberty Maven plugin, which we refer to as the Liberty Maven plugin, is an open source project that you can take a look at. But once that plugin is pulled into a POM or a Gradle build file, that provides a tool set to developers to really run their application in a development environment that is managed by our Open Liberty plugin. And it's done in what we call a dev mode process. So starting the plugin up in dev mode allows the Liberty Maven plugin to start up a Liberty server instance and then watch the developer's file system space for any updates or changes to source code. And when our plugin does notice that there's been a change to a Java part or a configuration part of the application, the dev mode portion of our plugin will do a couple of things for you. It's going to recompile the source code that it finds in the file system. It's going to repackage those updated compiles back into the application. And then it's going to recycle and redeploy that updated app into that running Liberty service server that it's managing on your behalf. And that way you get your application running instantaneously with its updates in a server environment. Additionally, Liberty Dev Mode via the plugin gives you the ability to run on-demand tests that you might have as part of your application. And it also can be run in a mode that will automatically run tests. Every time you save your code and the plugin goes through its cycle of recompiling, repackaging, and redeploying, it will then also run automatically your tests. And you can get instant feedback as to whether or not the change that you just made is a valid one or not. And it really provides that feedback that developers need to make great progress. So you can see down there at the bottom, it's available in both Liberty and Gradle flavors, and we're going to see a little bit of that in action shortly. In terms of tools, as I mentioned, Open Liberty has provided a series of extensions to some of the more popular IDEs out there, so VS Code, IntelliJ, and Eclipse. We provide an ability to do the same type of action within the IDE, starting and stopping a server, running tests, viewing those test reports. There's a micro profile starter extension that helps developers walk through the development of a new custom microservice project within those given IDEs. And finally, we also have a micro profile REST client generator that you can use as part of an IDE environment to generate those REST clients and interact with your REST-based applications. So that's just a little flavor of the ease of use for developers that we provide within these popular tools. So just as a sort of a grand overview of developer productivity, I've mentioned the IDE support that we provide and our integration into the build ecosystem with our support for Maven and Gradle. We've talked a bit about the APIs, sort of that broad spectrum of APIs that Open Liberty provides. Our images are present in the in the popular repositories out there for pulling. And as far as testing goes, we support those popular frameworks, JUnit and Arquillian, but we also provide support for another framework that's out there, open sourced, Microshed testing. So this is a testing framework that actually allows you to try out your applications in a more containerized environment, testing environment. So, if your application is interacting with other services and other containers, Microshed testing can be used to test those interactions and give you that feedback as to how your application is operating in that kind of environment. So, again, noticed by developers. We've got some more quotes down there, but touching, sort of on that dev mode and that hot reload action that really allows for that instant feedback, getting some notice. I'll just mention again, there are guides out there at that openliberty.io splash page. And I think the last I checked, I think about 22 of those guides are live guides. You can interact with them directly in your browser, and you don't have to, clone a repo to your local machine. You can go in and just, register with the system and try out all the various aspects of OpenLiberty right there in your browser. So I'll mention that again at the end, but just something to be aware of. All right, so